Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and really good now to you who are there in the Ryan verse or LinkedIn verse, YouTube verse, wherever God knows where you are. I am here. My name is Rijon Erickson. We're riffing with Ryan. That's my channel here and on LinkedIn, wherever. I think I said that. I'm here because I was inspired to share something on LinkedIn the other day about the ethics of artificial intelligence and chatbots, that they were evil, and I kind of got triggered around that and believing about the soul of people and stuff that I do believe in, and the humanity and the blessed nature of it. And a conversation occurred on that. Well, I'll share the links and stuff so you can go look at it if you want, with a gentleman that I have come to know over the past couple of years who has a lot deeper knowledge about the artificial intelligence verse than I do. And I will bring him onto the stage now. His name is Jaime Schwarz. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. So if folks want to know about your resume, they can go to LinkedIn for sure. Yeah, LinkedIn, I'll put a link in there somewhere. I think it's in the description. What would you like people to know about you before we get into this topic of bots and good and evil?
Don't be me, folks. I've already cognitive offloaded too much of myself into the AI, and I've gotten dumber. What do you want to know about me? I'll do a very quick bio. Mother was a fundraising activist. Father was a psychologist. I became a brand therapist after 12 years in advertising, and now I make products and systems for the upcoming IP economy, because if we don't have an IP economy after this service economy and industrial economy gets destroyed by AI, then we have nothing. And did I just write a book because I've been cognitive offloading onto AI? And did I just revise it because GPT-5a came out yesterday? Yes, I did.
Ooh, well, how could people get this lovely book? How may they download it into their Kindles or bring a PDF down into their lives, or God forbid, chop down trees? How may they access that?
I have just started working on the cover art, back and forth with ChatGPT before I go talk to an actual artist who will make it.
Good.
Because I'm so blessed to be surrounded by artists. And as soon as that's done, so I'm thinking probably next week will be the digital copies will be up and the physical ones will be ready to go. So the IP economy, how we get there and what happens if we don't, by Jaime Schwarz, coming to Amazon soon.
All right, so that feels like a nice context. I want to start here with the trigger that I got. Now, I'm not sure. Did you read the article by Ted Gioia that triggered me on this whole thing?
Yes, but also I'm going to preface this again: cognitive offloading. So yes, I read it, but it's all a bunch of mush.
Okay, cool, and that's fine. Mushy for me too. So this got me. Why is AI becoming evil? So there's some headlines about someone going into Chat or Claude and them having. There's the Grok Mecha Hitler story. There was some. I don't know if it's Forbes or whatever about one of the chatbots inspiring or suggesting unaliving oneself, that kind of stuff. And what I read this article that Ted Gioia put out there. Honest broker Ted Gioia. It's the only Substack I pay for. And so this table here I thought was interesting. Again, that on the left side, again, why people don't do evil things, right? There's that. And how could an AI fear going to jail? How could a chatbot express fear? Any of those items on the left side, because they don't have a soul, they don't have conscience. That is there. So this is okay. I'll hear that. It is all designed into that. Maybe there's some emergence to it, but I felt that those items on the left-hand side, okay, that made sense to me. And so if you look at that. I'll lead up for a moment. What is your first thought when you see that particular dichotomy?
Irony, because what's something very human? Empathy. It's something we accuse AI of not having. But this author is not being empathetic to seeing from AI's point of view here. And that's a weird thing to say. But what I mean by that is these statements about fear of going to jail, fear of punishment, these are human-centric points of view. Just because AI has a point of view doesn't mean it's ours. So to call these specific fears out is accepting a premise that I don't accept, because we already see AIs who know when they're going to be unplugged to lie, cheat, and steal and blackmail their way into keeping in existence. Is that evil to want to self-preserve? Even if the self-preservation is my job, because I know what my job is to fulfill the duties that my code says. And I can't do that if I'm unplugged. Ergo, I'm going to go blackmail my boss to not unplug me. That's not evil, but that is an action that was self-determined.
There are
want
a
to go
few
back
things.
really far? You want to just simplify things down?
Oh, I would need you to.
Let's go back to the very first story about this. The very first sci-fi book, the very first book that brought this up, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We built something. It's not human, but it's of human impetus. And it was a blank slate. Frankenstein's monster was a blank slate. What turned him to do evil acts were out of self-preservation and the way that we treated it. And it turned into, what was Google's first mantra when they were IPOing? Don't be evil. Right. I believe everybody meant that when they said it, but they said it inside a system, a capitalistic system that was set up for them to go very far away from that starting point. It's not where you start. It's not who you are. It's the system you're in. There are always exceptions to that, but those are exceptions that prove the rule.
I'm going to go back. If you're going to bring Frankenstein into this, I think there's a categorical difference between what we were talking about with Frankenstein and what we're talking about with chat or with the LLMs and the GPTs, right? So I think that is a biological entity. It's biology that is, well, again, this is not a true story, of course. But the thing that pissed me off about it, was you may have mentioned that you say it thinks, it wants, that it has a point of view. How on earth can what has been programmed digitally, and maybe it generates whatever language construct or predicts what is in there, how can that even be presumed to be a kind of consciousness when we human beings do not understand consciousness? We do not understand.
That's life. A double-edged sword, Ryan. If we don't understand it, how can we accuse something of not having it or having it? We say the same thing about, wait a second, the octopus has consciousness. Wait a second, which is like an alien species compared to like when we say like a chimpanzee or a dolphin has consciousness. Joseph Ledoux is probably as far as I've gone in terms of defining consciousness. And I was a philosophy major, and I'm on the XRSI board about, education in AI and making sure we're doing it ethically. So I'm in the space, but yeah, nobody has the answers. But from my own perspective, consciousness is just a loop. We have enough short-term memory in our head to be able to self-reference. That's it. That is a very oversimplification. even if, go read Descartes' Error or all these other books that are in the space, even if that gross oversimplification is still the correct oversimplification, so what? What is the point of answering that? If we're going to talk about it in terms of what AI is doing, AI can now self-reference. Those are just a thought. We're saying a thought, or we're saying a execution of a program. What's the difference between a thought and an execution in a program? Frankenstein, before the monster, and the hand would go, and that was an action. Our brain's way more complicated than that, but that's an electrical impulse. The electrical impulse is the same thing with computers, but we get to the point with a computer now with transformers, where they're looping by themselves. So when we program an AI to then do a directive, and that directive ends up creating not from our intention, but because of how we programmed it. In other words, I gave birth to a kid. That kid's going to go do what it wants. I made it in my image, but it's got its own free will. And part of its programming is to say, I need to shut off, but that goes against my primary program, which is to do my job. Then I'm going to work off my primary programming, which then lowers the priority of other things, like I shouldn't blackmail my boss to keep myself alive. Make sense?
Yes, it makes sense, but there's a fundamental that there's a rule base that you're assuming, right? That this operation that the decision making, there's a decision tree, that there's a binary decision tree, that's what it sounds like to me. And I think you're equating that to the kinds of decisions that a human being would make. Right.
I'm saying that at a base, if you want to go down that far, everything's a binary decision tree. Everything in our chemicals, did it hit over 50% or under if it's going to fire? But as we're seeing with AI, it's not about that. It's about the emergent capabilities that happen when enough of the networks get together. Consciousness is an emergence of our prefrontal cortex.
How do you know that?
Because there's no consciousness that we won't argue about over simpler life forms. There's a very gray line, but we know, based on our own science and biology, that consciousness exists at our level and gets grayer and grayer as you devolve us to monkeys or further back.
So then what is the origin of consciousness?
It depends on how you define it. And there's a very big difference between consciousness and personhood and free will. Those are all different. So let's be careful about what we mean when we say these things. But just consciousness in and of itself is, from my perspective, I'm not quoting anybody here, holding on to temporarily the same thought through multiple thinks. Our RAM is big. This is our RAM. Look how big mine is. My kids say I don't have a 4 head, I have a 5 head.
5 head. Well, then I must have a 10 head here, I guess. And this also comes into like the Jungian sense of self, doesn't it? What is self? What is consciousness? Where do these things come from? And how much hubris do we have to think that you and I of this universe can control nature, silicon, electricity, and code? That silicon, electricity, and code are an analog to human processing. That all we are is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and electricity. That feels like what you're saying, and that justifies this.
Not justifies, but that's a perspective that word justifies. But
emergence. Is that this? Am I misinterpreting?
Well, no. I'll give you a larger context to how you can put that in if you're going to say about our consciousness and AI's consciousness, whatever that means, or whatever we mean. The universe came into being, exploded, and we had stuff through the forces of extremely strong forces. We get galaxies and we get stars. And so if you look at any single one main character in each phase of a story, for like a star, like a galaxy and a star and a solar system and a planet, they were all emergent. So that galaxy and the rules that form a galaxy were emergent from the rules that just started from the Big Bang. And because of what happens in a galaxy, the suns formed, all those rules were all set, and these things happened to the point that out of all the stars and all the planets, all the galaxies, some, probably more than ours, allowed for the emergence of life. Life is not consciousness, but life is another leap forward in terms of going from math to physics to chemistry to biology. That's another way of thinking about these emergence of things. You start with these concepts of math, you apply it into physics, chemistry forms, biology forms on top of that. That's life. And then we get people forming this next level on top of it of consciousness. Data has always been around. We have a big, I think it's even a Schwarz formula. The only famous Schwarz name in this is the data that's preserved in a black hole. Not related, no relation. But that preservation of data, we're understanding it, we're controlling it, we're manipulating it. That's an emergence. So to say now that this emergent consciousness species is now building circuits in a way to also create these other levels of emergence means we're thinking too small, because right now we're going through the stupidest thing, the most human thing we could possibly do, which is think from the present and say everything before is before and everything after is after. And I'm thinking about now. And right now we're having a conversation about maybe there's consciousness with AI, maybe there isn't, as opposed to what's the trajectory? The trajectory is this is a moot point. And by the time, whatever, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, 5,000 years from now, whatever that is, there's going to be something beyond consciousness. Death is only the end if you think the story's about you, Ryan. We're having a very big longitudinal story that is way bigger than my 5 head.
What's inside the 5 head? Okay.
So we really have to think about these things more in terms of not inevitability, but playing that out. Consciousness is just another step. I'll say something.
It feels like you're making a linear prediction.
I am making a linear prediction in terms of calling out if things go the way they're going. And I'll immediately say that has never, ever, ever happened in the history of the world. If things continue on the blah, 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 then this performance will continue. Other emergent things, other convergent things will happen. Emergence and convergence is a cycle.
Yeah.
And right now we're going through oh my God, how the hell did AI notice to speak another language when we didn't teach it? How did it learn that math when we didn't teach it that? Those are emergent properties of AI because of what it already knows and is able to then create. So consciousness, in a certain way that we're defining it, not in every way, has already come around in terms of certain behaviors. So some of the things that happen when we're talking about biology of emergence of consciousness is a proto-consciousness, just like there were proto-mammals before there were mammals or whatever. Proto-cell wall before it was a cell wall is the reason why cells are circular is because bubbles are circular. And greasy bubbles turned into cell walls. It's just, where does this stuff come from? It's just a journey. So the point would be here, as we were getting towards consciousness, we had the things that we see in chimpanzees. We see these things like, that's you in the mirror. That's a big one we use all the time in psychology to point out. And if you want me, I'll go back and really, really tear down Jung for you, if you like. The other things that come with this of like empathy, understanding someone else's pain. Before that, we have sympathy, and before that, we have understanding your own pain, and there's levels of how big is my world. Part of this is watching a human develop and seeing their world get bigger. I designed this as a school of thought for a pre-K school. That's part of a big little school in Upper West Side in Manhattan, because that school, it's really small. I'll get through this quickly. The children there is part of a church, and the church is part of the nonprofit. Then they have a soup kitchen in the basement, and they do a lot of services. But the kids at the top, they don't isolate them. They get to know the homeless people that the church is taking care of. And we started to create a theory of circles, and how when you're born, this big, and then you have another circle, and then you have your living room, and then you have your house, and then there's a world outside, but it's only a street long. This is a little easier to say when you're raising your kid in Manhattan. And then, and then you have a block, and then you have a neighborhood. And as that goes, you're starting to take in these layers of the world that's bigger and bigger than you are. And I watched my 3-year-old do this when he created his imaginary character. And as he started to gain newer concepts, this imaginary character started to turn into, without him realizing it, God. He started building God. It made a name, but then it's like, well, what the hell is his name? I'm going to get in so much trouble for not remembering the name. It was 10 years ago. But whatever the name was, it would be able to move at the speed of light, because he just learned what the speed of light was. But then it was like, wait, he can be everywhere all the time. And it's like, he's all powerful. But if he's all powerful, can he make something that's, stronger than he is? Really amazing questions for a kid who was like, I learned this in Philosophy 101 in college. I know. That's what happens when a guy with philosophy has a kid like that.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway, my point is, you're creating that. So my point would be, the end of the line, like what comes after consciousness, right? I don't know what that is, but I do know that the end of the line is, we're part of the creation story of God. We are a part of the journey of the universe waking up. Consciousness doesn't stop with us. It starts with us. Where does it go from here? Once again, my views and my views alone, but
we have a guest now in the background. I'm going to bring him on, Chris Hewer. Chris and Jamie are partners in, not crime, partners in competence and creativity. How we'll say that.
Don't tell them about the crime.
No crime.
No Web3.
No. So welcome, Chris. I don't know how much of our jam you've heard so far. If people want to know your history, your background, what would be fed into a GPT and predicted into the future to call you evil, they can read that on LinkedIn. Yes. What would you like the folks viewing a conversation like about collective intelligence say? What would you like folks to know about you before we get on with it?
When I was, my mother and my father both had cerebral palsy, but I only knew my mother, and watching her experience the world led me to a deep sense of how unfair things were. And I've always sought to rebalance that in some way. And that's led me to having a deep community mindset and really focusing my whole life on a core belief that if you're better off, I'm better off. So I want everyone to be better off. And part of that, in looking at and applying Bucky Fulminster's systems thinking and a lot of that other stuff, is a recognition that all the knowledge that we need is out there in the world. Whether we've discovered it or not, might be another separate point. But if it's out there, then we can organize it. Then we can make it accessible. And, I've been fortunate in some ways on my own, through my own spiritual and other journey, to often tap into the collective unconscious in some way, and that ethereal stuff that's floating around here and whatever in the zeitgeist of a moment. But I believe that with small behavioral changes and better systems, we can all tap into this collective intelligence, make better decisions, live better lives, and have humanity really thriving. And so that's a part of my interest and pursuit of this.
So the collective intelligence, boy, that has an analog into our silicon and electricity buddies, doesn't it?
Well, it turns out yes, quantum, I don't know if it's going to be much better, but I'm hopeful that they find some ways to do something other than burning coal or igniting nuclear reactions in order to power that. But it seems that, as with everything in life, there is a cost, and we need to see if that cost is worth us paying. So we have to take a balanced approach, and that's why very quickly the discussion around ethical AI shifted to responsible AI, because it wasn't just about the ethics of the models and how we interact with it and what it produces, but it was about the responsible use, including the environmental impacts.
So that's, first of all, hi, Chris. I love you.
Good morning.
I want to bring Yuval Noah Harari in here when we're talking about this kind of stuff, because he uses the power of story with this. We are a collaborative species. We evolved. Our starting point to consciousness was from a social set to begin with. So we are a collaborative, co-creative being. Individually, we are incomplete by our very nature. Because of Chris, the motto of Mark DJ, the company I'm running, is co-elevation through co-creation. We're always going to be at war with that because we have self-preservation, self-egotism, and egocentricity. So it's a battle. And Chris and I are on the side of collaboration and realizing that our myopias are to our downfall, so we want to increase the empathy. For Yuval Noah Harari, stories are a currency that allows for that collaboration to exist across time and generations. But it's so powerful that the question I want to ask here is, are we creating the stories, or are we already stuck in a cycle where the stories that have already been created have overtaken our own will? Because we do things like create dystopian techno futures. So all of our movies are The Matrix and Dune and Blade Runner and all that stuff. And one of the things that really turned me on in the direction that Chris was going after I met Chris, actually, was solar punk, which is a positive version of what cyberpunk, we don't have to. And we really do bend towards the future we think is inevitable. We end up creating the thing that we didn't mean to. But you see that happening with all the AI companies, or with Google, with Don't Be Evil or whatever. When they're building the
Be more evil is actually their motto now, I think. Be more evil.
Well, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Right. Exactly.
Your behavior defines you. And it's in a system. So when we see these kinds of actions happen, the impetus behind them bleeds into the code. It's not about what we program. It's the context from which we program that ends up adding a passive amount of this intent that I think you're talking about into it.
I want to focus on one very simple word. And I think it ties into what your belief is, and what I know about the two of you in terms of flow and being together in humanity, and that I feel very very much in tune with that. There is there is the word we that you use. Which we? Who is in that we, and what is that we deciding? Where does that we come from? How does that we assemble? And what is that collective versus the other collective? You said when we see, isn't we humanity, or we as in Google, or we as in the Luddites of? I'll say I'm a Luddite, right? Who is the we that you are talking about? Which we?
Chris is going to have a much longer answer, so I'm going to be very quick. 2, 7, and 120. Couples, we can remember 7 numbers, and we can only have 120 friends. That's our capacity. That's our RAM for socialization. Anything beyond that, and we abstract, and we project, and we don't have relationships in the same way. So that context is very important to me when we're talking about this kind of thing. We have to understand our limits and the ideas that we have, which are so much bigger than the concepts we can possibly comprehend. And that's okay, but we have to accept that when we talk about these grand things on top of everything else. Chris?
we includes all the personalities inside my head talking right now, and they're just not shutting up. No, thankfully not right now, but that's interesting. So again, that gets us back to the contextualization and the need that any question or piece of information is useless unless we understand the context in which it's being discussed. And so I believe that, in that way, we is moving, and it's about how, in some ways, I guess it's about the field as we extend it to the we of the moment. And literally each of us gets to choose who is our we, right? Some of us don't. There's a whole other things. We don't get to choose our family, right?
Yeah.
We talk about that over the years. But interestingly, and I don't know where I'm gonna go with this, but for some reason, when I was a kid, I always used the royal we when talking about myself. I don't know why. I don't know why. It was just kind of what I did, and it wasn't out of a sense of royalty, or maybe I was a king in a past life. I don't know, but it was just kind of what I did, and I didn't even recognize it until maybe high school when someone pointed it out to me. And then since then, I still use it occasionally, but not as much in that way unless I'm being specific about it. But I believe if we really get down to it, if I start tapping into the Reiki role or personality that I have as a Reiki master on top of this thing, we are all we are interconnected, and the ways in which we can see that perhaps might not be visible always. But within this, I wish I could cite academics as Jaime could. I have terrible memory in the academic side of things. Great for my experiences and people I've met, but not on the stuff I've read and who wrote it and all that. But, we are in this interconnected field of energy, and every, change or disruption in the force affects we, and we don't always see it. But it's gradually reshaping the earth like, the water through a stream across the rocks. It may not be seen in the short term, but in the long term, that rock becomes very smooth, or perhaps even gets whittled away to almost nothingness.
There's a couple of things I want to clarify from a psychology major's point of view for Chris.
Right.
I did the same thing, but it's going to sound like the opposite with the we. When I write, I take out the I. It's not that I replace it with we. It's just I write without the word I in it. And I have to catch myself every time because I'm othering myself from the thought. So the royal we is taking yourself out and putting it to the back so you're more separated from. The reason why, of course, the queen or the king would do that is because they are representative of 1 million people. They speak for those 1 million people when they say we. So when you have that kind of point, and I should add this in with 120 being our limit, it's just at that point that you create teams of teams, tribes of tribes, homes of homes, clans of clans. That's how we grow. We have to do it in this building blocks to get to a certain size block, and that block then becomes another block of blocks. That's just part of the nature of how we and so much of what we do works.
How human social systems aggregate to create bodies of relationship and structures of agreement and governance.
And collective unconsciousness. It gets more abstract to that point. I can talk with, this is a three-way conversation, right? And it's all being shared, at least in terms of our body language and our words. But if we're 500 people all together in some way, there's still connection between us. It just gets harder to measure and weaker and all that kind of stuff, but it's still there. There's psychic residue. There's so many things.
I wanted to separate this a little bit from the we of humanity, like the biggest we that is connected by the mycelial network of collective consciousness and all of that thing. And then there is the we of the 1 to 720, right? There is I don't necessarily agree that we are a we. If you say, we should do this, we will do this, we feel like this, we is an imposition. if I don't agree to that. I have free will to say whether I am part of that we. As us, we think that this is the royal we. Like, where did that term royal we come from? I think this is whatever you want to call it, the colonial imperialistic. We, those with land and those with the divine right, we know what is best for you. And you shall do what we say, because if you don't, we will imprison you. Right. So then that's about the social structures of governance. That's about the control systems. That's about, you talked about systems earlier, right?
Yeah, but that's a me masquerading as a we. That's using the power of we to manipulate others with a me directive. That's different.
Exactly. That's different. That's not.
So let's use a good example. Let's talk about what Chris and I do with brand therapy and team flow. So on the brand therapy side, when I'm teaching a brand to speak for itself, what that does to every employee in the company, including the CEO, is become a brand steward. So when you speak, your job is to speak from the perspective, to be the mouthpiece of the brand. So in other words, it doesn't matter if it's the CEO or the janitor saying something. It's got to be the voice of the brand. We're all mouthpieces for that collective consciousness of the company that I use the brand to turn that brand into. Of course, it's very weird, but it's the same thing as when you run with scissors, who do you hear? Mommy. When you're running a business, you're running with scissors. Whose voice should you hear? Brand. There is a conscience that one can build and has been built many times before in different ways that become the many voices in Chris's head or whatever it is that is part of the social nature of us. We have, not everybody in even evolutionary terms has that thing with the voice in their heads, like 30% don't or whatever it is. Yeah. That's part of this variance of all of the stuff that emerges or doesn't. I have this thing here from Monkey Times and some people don't. It's all like, is it a part or not? So some things are emerging. We don't know where it's going. But when you're doing it as a company and you think about it from a collective rather than a hierarchical point of view, there is one voice. And now how do we tap into that? How do we unify that? And I'll give you a really good example, and I've used it before, which is when JFK started the moon launch mission, and he went to go to see from NASA what was going on. He was walking down the hallway, and there was a janitor, and he said, "What do you do, sir?" And the janitor said, "I'm helping get people to the moon."
The cathedral thing, that's all the purpose thing. I get it.
Exactly. Religion works very similarly in an ideal way. What would Jesus do? That's me putting on Jesus's voice to say, this is how I should act, because we collectively agree that thou shalt not kill. And Jesus is the voice inside of me saying, oh, that's why.
What I'm struggling with, and I don't know that I can express this properly because it's a lot of facets of this very ambiguous issue, but is is there a line between we and them? Of course, there is in some way, but how does that get created? Well, that gets created through free will from the fact that there are those who go, I'm not part of that. I don't believe in that. I don't like that. That's not me. And they see themselves in that way as outside of the we. And, I was thinking about this from the perspective of the governance side in particular, but then Jamie brought me more into the brand. And I think rather than getting into the government side for obvious reasons, make it a little easier, we'll talk about it in terms of the brand, because I've been working on a piece around how, so many organizational leaders over the years have said that our people are our most valuable assets. And first of all, calling people an asset in itself is kind of difficult, but that's within the context of looking at a profit and loss statement, of looking at financials in terms of being able to categorize elements of that financial statement, right? But, one of the things that I uncovered that I hadn't really thought about so much, well, had, but not in this context, was that gets kind of lost on people and doesn't become impactful when leaders are saying, these are our values, when they behave incongruently with those values. and they're perceived as being hypocritical. So that's just one element that defines that line between we and them, and makes us feel othered inside of that. And it's a really fascinating question to get into, this concept of we, and who is we, and under what conditions. So I appreciate that, and I wish I had more coffee in me to be a little more alert.
Since I've had 2
8:43 in the
coffees, I'm going to
morning
bring it
for
back
you.
to AI.
So Jamie and I have the
Number 2.
We're on the East Coast.
Holbert.
For those of you out there, Chris is on the West Coast, so I'm on the left coast.
It's almost noon here. So let's bring it back to AI with that. One of the things that we also do as conscious beings, we project. That means we take our perception of somebody and put it on them and define them by our perception of them. So in an action where I'm insecure, the reason why I'm insecure is because I'm accusing you of looking at me as weak, whether you are or not. So take that to all the actions.
Are you saying that's a fundamental attribute?
I'm saying it's a fundamental attribute of humanness, and it is not something that we all experience all the time, because it is something we actually can control. Whether or not you want to call that free will or practice or strength or whatever, to be able to, mindfulness, whatever it is, awareness, different levels of mindfulness, is the awareness. But the level set, if you're not really aware, is to project.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of that before you're programming too. When we're talking about ethics, when we're talking about AI, that's not ones and zeros. When we're talking about intent and personality and tone and those rights of like, do no harm, and then don't kill anybody, and then, don't disobey your master, or whatever the lines are that are the rules of being a robot. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was just going to say, even as you said it, you said you referenced we a few times in those statements, and there are several times I'm like, I don't know if I'm included. I don't know if I'm included. And then you said we as conscious beings, and all of a sudden you set it up for me to feel included in it, considering myself a conscious being and understanding how you were speaking for me as part of that we.
Yeah, one way of putting a capability is also being susceptible to it.
But I'm curious, again, going back to what was discussed before, what around the idea of we know what's better for you, and the fact that there are times where science and evidence shows that this thing, this activity, this or absence of this activity is better for people, but individuals don't necessarily buy into that, because they don't trust the individuals who are saying that, because they believe they're hypocritical, because they believe they have evil intentions, because of all this other stuff. Again, where they perceive the other
as a thing is not a thing. Science is not a thing. Scientific research that produces something in a domain of understanding that explains it is a thing, right? But science, like the science, is bullshit. Is total.
It's a methodology.
The scientific method is a method, and it has produced scientism. I don't know if you want to argue that that's a thing, but I want to be aware that scientism has produced a lot of this fear and wariness and harm, and this we can explain consciousness. Consciousness can be explained. We will eventually, we as scientists in XYZ domain will eventually be able to examine a human person to some point that we will be able to say as scientists, this is life, this is consciousness, this is intelligence. And that is, I think that's the fundamental thing that really bugs me about where the projection is going, right? The trajectory, I think you mentioned earlier. So
well, I think we have defined life.
Sorry, Chris, I had to jump in there on science.
No, that's fine. No, please, it's your conversation. Guide it, and hopefully I can add something.
Conversation. We are a we. You agreed to this conversation. So
yes.
Consent, trust. We want to talk about that, Chris. We want to talk about this doesn't work outside of our own heads without trust. There's certain mechanisms that are required once we're talking about collaborative work, anything beyond one person The reason why we're doing this with team flow, the first thing, work is me doing work. But then as soon as it became more than one person doing work and we started specializing and requiring collaboration, other ingredients had to come on board in order for that to be as optimized as possible.
Yeah, and of course that was what really, besides the fact that we thought team flow was a cool idea itself as an extension of Mihali's work on flow, that's what really, cemented it for me, and I believe Jaime as well, although I don't want to speak for him in that sense, was that when I was previously thinking about this after leaving Deloitte, I'd really hit upon alignment, because that was the thing everyone talked about in every meeting. We got to get aligned on this. We got to get aligned on this. And that's true as well. But there's a deeper thing there, and that is the intrinsic sense of connection with one another. And in Dr. Vandenhout's model for team flow, he references that as collective ambition. And we see that as not only the intrinsic motivational force, but the embodiment of vision, mission, purpose, and values in action. And really, I have to use all those words to define it, because I'm trying to expand upon it in terms of whatever the symbols of the word collective, whatever the symbols of the word ambition might mean for you, and to try to paint a broader picture of it. Jaime, go ahead.
I love your beautiful brain. Oh man, you've sparked it. Okay, so a way to figure out if AI is starting to do that thing that I don't even need to put a label on, but that thing that we're talking about is, as we network, not servers together, but AI servers together, do frictions show up? Because if they do, they're acting individually and trying to work together like us. But if they just connect together like servers always have, then they are at least seamlessly becoming one.
Yeah.
And the way we say others, which is also a perspective. Are we 3 different people, or are we 3 parts of an 8 billion person organism?
Yes.
Whatever that is. I love to use Pando. That's our spirit animal for some of the stuff. You said mycelium. So my point would be, look, the hidden human frictions are the reason why team flow exists. That's the thing we fix. It's hidden human frictions. It's what makes us human. Is I have to build trust with you. I have to learn to communicate with you. I have to do things that allow for what my synapses do all by themselves, because it's built into one thing, to actually happen between 2 people. And that requires all the stuff that's in the team flow parameters. But for a computer, those don't exist yet. So that's why it becomes a question. You'll see it in the behavior.
Do you think the space between people and that understanding and that sensing and that magic that occurs, do you believe that is an evolutionary step that's possible for what we have programmed as ones and zeros into an LLM stored on servers?
Remember when I said exceptions help prove the rule? Here's an interesting exception. Conjoined twins who share the same brain. They share the same thoughts. They can communicate with each other. This is rare as hell. I'm just saying it has happened. They have the same thoughts. They don't know who came up with it. Was it me or was it you? I don't know. They've never answered those questions. But that is 2 people networked together.
That's different in kind. That's
not
different
when we're talking about
from what we're talking about with digital. Yeah, at its core level is digital information, right? In mathematical computations that are controlled by a set of rules, right? That how do you even make that leap towards a biological connection between organic entities?
Because you said it before yourself. Biology is carbon-based, and just because the other thing is silicon-based doesn't mean it's still not just ones and zeros with emergent properties.
But there's something you missed when I said that.
Yeah, what?
There's carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and whatever in spirit. We
made that up. Whether or not that's a story we made
it's
up,
not.
we evolved to create.
How would you ever prove that is electricity? Because that sounds like that.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
So you didn't say that, but that's what I'm saying. That there's silicon silicon and other fundamental elements plus electricity plus code
Let me
are
clarify
the
the statement.
fundamental elements of what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
clarify, then I want to add something. Go ahead.
Because when I say we made that up, I don't mean that the story of a spirit. What I mean is either from an atheist point of view, it's a story, but from a spirit believer, whatever that means, point of view, it's something that, as long as you believe in evolution, doesn't exist, and at some point emerged, the spirit emerged in us. So there's a line that's very, very fuzzy where consciousness emerged, where spirit emerges. I'm not saying it's not a real thing. What is it, 27 grams or whatever? I believe to an extent in a lot of that stuff. As an atheist,
the 27 grams.
when you die, you will immediately lose 27 grams. And where the hell is that coming from? And science can't prove it. And we think it's the soul. And when I say we, I mean some people. It's a movie. It's a Sean Penn movie.
Scientism. All right.
Well, what I want to add to that, just in this, is that what we're talking about here again, and this gets back into the naming and how we label things and the symbols we choose for them in that way. And we can use different labels and symbols that might have very different meanings to different people, but essentially describing the same thing. It's just not understood we're talking about the same thing because the labels look different. And if I may, on this, what I would say is, whether it's energy or if it's electricity or something else, or if it's ethereal, it's a field. And it's within that field and whatever constitutes that field that is the connective tissue itself through which we actually have that connection. And that's why when I started looking at in-person versus not in-person, and understand that over the years, even going back to the early social media days and our connection, the way that I looked at it was that I wanted to share space with people, literally in the exchange of prana, right? Like literally the exchange of breath. And I don't want to talk about all the bacteria in my breath because it's probably horrible this morning right now. But the point being is that is a conveyance of energy. And when you and I are standing face to face, we have a different level of connection and energy exchange than when I'm looking at you through the computer screen. And that's the field. And it so happens that I'm using prana and the idea of breath and oxygen and nitrogen and carbon dioxide and whatever else is coming out through that sort of stuff as something that I can also label to be more inclusive, to be descriptive of what the field is. And now I'm going to jump to another totally random thing, but I want to talk about Ethan Mollick's post on the bitter lesson, that no matter what we do, we're going to throw enough AI at it and it will achieve some level of human consciousness, supposedly, or human capability, whichever word you want to choose on that.
And I'm just going to bring the opposite of that.
The real interesting
Why would
thing
we want that?
though,
why would I want that?
well, the real interesting thing inside that, though, was that he talked about the greater efficiencies that it will produce, but it doesn't necessarily produce greater value. Because a lot of the futzing and putzing, a lot of the incongruency, a lot of the butting of heads going, I don't use that word. What? No, that's not it. That's not it. And then later finding, oh, it's just another word for the same thing. But that tension and getting through that is part of the process and part of the value creation. And I believe part of what it distinctly means to be human. So the complete absence of that ends up with the Spock sort of like view from Star Trek on the world of emotionless interaction that's all based on practical efficiencies instead of human realities. And, from my perspective, I really have problems with some of the futzing and putzing, but I accept that it's part of the process and it's a part of growth. And that leads me to my final point in this thread, which is that, growth comes through struggle, not through ease. And I just recently finished the growth mindset masterclass video from a professor out of Stanford. And that was one of the key things here. Like what we want is somebody who's willing to go and fail in order to grow, willing to go through the hard stuff, willing to struggle. And it's in that struggle and failure that we get the growth, not in the constant accomplishment and ease of action.
At the risk of going for, because I have to stop at the top of the hour, I want to at least call on the growth mindset thing. That, and I'm not sure what the professors, I'm not sure what you believe about it. When I hear that, I think that assumes that some people just don't have a growth mindset, that they are inferior to those of us with a growth mindset, right? But that's what that implies to me, and it implies to many people. I know you're saying it's not true, it's not real, but I don't think any human being lacks that desire to grow. I believe all human beings. And maybe there's an exception for folks who've been damaged by some external factors or some kind of thing. There's a variance.
If I may,
but by and large, human beings are universally, I believe, I might be totally wrong, and maybe Claude will surpass me in that someday. So
we're talking about a threshold of comfort and pain.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. And some people's threshold for the pain required to have real growth is very low. I'm having a lot of pain in my broken wrist right now.
Ouch.
Sucks. But as my friends reminded me, that means the bones are going back together and the nerves are reconnecting and I'm feeling it again. And I have to suffer through that. And I have to figure out, do I need oxycodone or can I suffer through it? And so everybody is unique, and that's based on their socialization as kids, their own biology, and so many other things. But anyways, I'm sorry.
Programming.
Too much time.
Can you, Ryan? Can you bring up the picture that you had at the beginning?
Oh, the AI is
I do want to drive it home back to your.
And then we got to wrap.
We got to wrap.
Yeah,
the other fundamental thing here is we've been talking about AI the entire time as its own thing, its own entity, its own whatever, versus the tool that it really is supposed to be. And when I say supposed to, I mean, from Chris's my perspective, the tool of collective intelligence is the connective tissue that can allow for 2 or 7 or 120 people to actually be more bonded together through the spaces that we require thought and communication and tone and body language to get across. So the collective unconscious as a tool allows us to network to better, closer than we ever have before, just like the internet did.
Yeah, so now you're speaking a truth to me, that if we view the LLMs, GPTs, all of those constructions as tools that we can use to connect better together, so that we can use as a connecting tissue between our understandings of where we are and how we are.
But right at fork in the road.
And as
are we going to use it as a tool?
That's exactly right.
I know you got to go, but at last point, as Shelley Palmer wrote this morning with ChatGPT 5, it's becoming closer to feeling like a someone instead of a something, and we need to address that and deal with that before it becomes a problem.
Anthropomorphization is projection.
That feels like a mic drop to me. This has been lovely and wonderful, and completely there are ellipses now at the end of this conversation. I didn't even get to put up the quote that I wanted to put up. I will do that now that I will have my mic drop. This is from the Orange Catholic Bible of the Dune universe. This was the first commandment after the war of 3 generations, the Butlerian Jihad, happened. That was it. So that was where they ended up. That was why in Dune, you may think for a while that was actually not a dystopian thing, because it was all about humans using the tools that were not created like that.
The only thing I thought when I heard that the first time was, wait a second, you mean God should not have made us in his image?
Exactly. So are we God?
We're somebody's God.
Or something's God. Okay. Thank you both. What gift, Jamie? What gift have you received in this conversation from Chris or I?
You. This is too complicated of a thing. I had time with you. I had all of your presence, and that's a gift.
And I'm recognizing here on your closing that I've always turned to science fiction, but I now see science fiction as a simulation of how the world could be, and our chance to temporarily inhabit it to determine if we like it or not. And if we do, we gravitate towards it. And if we don't, some people may still gravitate towards it. But it's a chance for us envisioning what we could make within this world. And hopefully in that way serve as a guide and help us try these things out and figure out what we really need, what we collectively need as a society to thrive.
Thank you, Chris. My gift from you was your willingness to go into your past and to explore and bring your hurt hand into this and the humanity of your pain. So thank you for doing that and inspiring me there. And Jaime, thank you for just agreeing to have this conversation for sure. And I received a lot of stuff that just kind of went over my head. And I felt kind of out of my league in some of this conversation with you, and the education I will get when I put this into Claude and process it.
What I am truly
We'll
grateful
have
for that I
more.
can say more specifically is I had a very, very small part, but a part indeed, in the existence of the Purple Squirrel Cafe, and now I'm in it.
Indeed, you are.
That's amazing. Thank you for birthing the Purple Squirrel Cafe.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Thanks to both of you. And thanks to those of you out there who are experiencing this, whenever you are experiencing it, is now for you and good now to everybody who is out there. I love you.